Okay.
Okay, how you doing, Stephen?
Doing good. How about you?
Good. So, Stephen and I are back for another installment of What They Said. And tonight I don't know how we got on the topic, but we figured it would be great to do a Zoomcast devoted entirely to baseball films. We're both big fans, and kind of zeroed in on half a dozen, seven, I think, that we're going to talk about tonight. And I'd kind of like to squeeze in a little bit on the Ken Burns film, which, obviously we weren't going to rewatch, but
It's
I
all
think,
good.
sure, we remember enough of it. So before we begin, Stephen, I thought we could just spend a minute or two just talking about our backgrounds as baseball fans. So the two things I know about you are that you are a lifelong Giants fan going back to the San Francisco Giants. I assume you had,
1958.
yeah, you have no, you were alive when the New York Giants were around, but you weren't a baseball fan then,
I
right?
don't think I knew of them, you
Okay.
know.
And the second thing I know is that you were a contributor to the early baseball prospectus. Now I know I looked you up. You did a whole bunch of online stuff. You at least made it between covers once, right? Or more than once? I don't know.
Yeah, three or four, two, three, four.
Okay.
I was in there.
Okay, I'll have to check. I have a huge library. I don't know if I have any of those prospectuses, but I'll check. Um, Now, myself, I became a fan in 1970. Bought an edition of Xander Hollander. Remember those guides he used to put out every year? Poured over it endlessly. Became a Reds fan. This is pre-Jays. And about 75 or so, 76 maybe, even I think it covers up to 73. I probably got a couple years later. I bought my first baseball encyclopedia, and that really stepped things up. Was distraught over the 1975 World Series, the Carlton Fisk year. And then the Jays get a franchise 2 years later. I don't really become a huge Jays fan right away because they were so bad. I stick with the Reds, but then I become a fan of the Yankees, the Reggie Yankees, just because they were so interesting. I don't really connect with the Jays in a huge way until '83 when they finally became a good team, and then they had a great 10-year run, culminating with the two World Series wins. Then I kind of go off them and follow all the home run hitters through the '90s. Even though, and I often say now, myself and everyone, we were paying attention to all the home runs and missing the fact that probably the four greatest starting pitchers ever were in their primes in the mid and late '90s. Um, and then, I kind of got back into the Jays the year of the bat flip, and takes us up to present day. Okay.
Since we've done this, I'll just make a connection. There have
Yep.
been two times in the San Francisco Giants era where they almost moved. The first
Yeah.
one was
And
in the mid 70s. They were going to go to Toronto and become the Toronto Giants, I guess. And
absolutely. That
a
just let me say,
local,
go
yeah,
ahead.
a local property owner stepped in, said, I'll buy them. And so they stayed in San Francisco. It happened again about 15 years later. They're going to move to Florida. And then another big conglomerate of rich people bought them. And in both those cases, the places they were moving ended up with a team of their own. So everybody's
Okay.
happy.
I didn't know about the Florida move. The 76 was a huge thing. In fact, I was actually kind of disappointed when the Jays did get their American League franchise. I wanted the Giants. I figured I wanted to start with this venerable old franchise. Um, I Moscone played a huge role in that, I think.
Yes.
Read a history of the Jays, and it was really, not the money, but he just got in there and made sure that someone kept the team there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the seven films we're going to talk about, we can decide on the order. We're going to talk about two from the 70s, Bad News Bears, Michael Ritchie's Bad News Bears, John Badham's Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars. And then we're going to skip forward. There was kind of a flurry of baseball films in the, I guess, late 90s or early 90s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. I think we're going to talk about Field of Dreams, A League of Their Own. That brings us up to four. Moneyball, which comes much later. The recent documentary on Reggie Jackson. And what's the seventh one I'm missing?
Bull Durham.
Bull Durham. Yes, that was part of the late 80s, early 90s. So, do we want to take them more or less chronologically? Do we want to work backwards? Do you have a preference?
Uh, I mean, chronology works. It's
Okay,
easy.
so in terms of chronology, I believe the first one is either, I think they probably both come out in 75, Bingo Long and Bad News Bears. Um, Maybe being the more famous, we could start with Bad News Bears, uh, a film that I avoided watching for years. I don't know why. I guess I just had a certain impression of it in my mind. I figured it was going to be this rollicking comedy, and it is first and foremost a comedy. But
Mhm.
I had no idea that it's really about this subject that, I mean, I had a great dad, but my dad was kind of like, the two coaches in Bad News Bears. It's really about how awful parents behave and coaches behave when they coach kids baseball. I mean, you're watching this one film, and it's, the David and Goliath story, this the cliched, this misfit team that Walter Matthau inherits or, decides to coach as he gets something in return from somebody local or something. There's some arrangement made. They're terrible. He can't get the players he wants, and et cetera, et cetera. But by the time you get to the end of the film, it's just something else entirely, isn't it?
Yeah. He knows what he's doing. That sneaks up on you because he's a drunk and he smokes stogies. And Vic Morrow's the clean cut coach on the other team that knows what he's doing. And it turns out that Walter Matthau's character also knows what he was doing. So that's part
Yeah,
of the plot.
yeah. I mean, it almost kind of lets Mathau off the hook because he catches himself in the final game behaving just horribly towards his own team. And then he stops and he realizes, whereas they carry it forward with Vic Morrow and to the point where his own son turns on him, which is a great sequence. Um, it almost could have been the end of the film there, but they go on and they finish the game. Um, it is funny. It's got lots of funny stuff. The kids are funny. I would contrast them with the kids in School of Rock, where you've got this film comes 20 years later, and here it's the teacher with all the personality and the weirdness and the quirkiness, and the kids are straight arrows. Bad News Bears. I mean, it's like Saturday Night Fever, which is actually John Badham directed Bingo Long,
Mhm.
where it's this great popular success, but the kids, the stuff they say, they would never have that come out of kids' mouths in a current day film. I mean, racial epithets, profanity. It's really something. So the
Mhm.
language the kids use, or sexual overtones. Um, not Jodie Foster, Tatum O'Neal. She's very good in it. Um, I think probably a bit of an extension of her role in Paper Moon. She's still on the tomboyish side of things, I
Yeah.
guess, even though she fights against that. Walter Matthau, excellent as always. This is kind of his heyday, that period starting, I guess, with. I won't go back to The Best Man and because he's very different, though. Starting really with The Fortune Cookie, right
Mhm.
through to The Odd Couple, and taking Pelham 1, 2, 3 in this. He's just finds his voice in those films. And any other performances of note in it? Vic Morrow, the lad. Vic Morrow died in a gruesome helicopter or
Yes.
on site accident, right?
Yeah. I was always a fan of Vic Morrow's in the sort of uh, method actor who wasn't a big giant star way. He's always had some jobs. He was on a TV series or two and starred in some B movies, but he was just some guy. And yeah, and now he's known for that and for being is it Jennifer Jason Leigh's
Yeah,
dad.
I was just going
Yeah.
to say that. Yep. Was he in a famous TV series? One series
Famous
people
here
didn't.
was a series called Combat in the
Yes.
60s, which took
Yeah.
place in World War II. I want to say the Battle of the Bulge, but I don't know enough about the war. I know that my dad, who was in that war, he watched it religiously. Whether it was real or not, I don't know. But in
Yeah.
any event,
It was
he was in
combat.
that, and yeah,
I think there were tops cards too, because I seem to remember, was that when I was a
yeah.
kid, I had combat cards. Um, what else about it though? It's Michael Ritchie, who was one of the many American directors at the time who liked to look at American institutions.
Mhm.
Um, in Downhill Racer, he takes a look at the Olympics, or sports, I guess, in general. Candidate, he takes a look at politics. Smile, a very good film called Smile. He
Yes,
takes a look
yes.
at the beauty pageant. This, he takes a look at Little League Baseball. So he's a little like Frederick Wiseman, a little like Altman in that regard. I don't think he's ever thought of to be in the very front ranks of 70s directors, with Altman and Coppola and Scorsese, but he's a really good director. A number of good films. I know you don't like the canon as much as I do, but
Yeah, but that's not to say I don't like it.
yeah, okay. And I think many people would call this his greatest film. I don't know.
The candidate
No,
or the Bad News
Bad News
Bears.
Bears. Bad News Bears.
Well, that I wouldn't say that.
I would
Candidate's
not.
not a bad
Yeah, I
choice.
wouldn't either. But I think that it just has a certain reputation. I think because of that angle that the way it just switches things up at the end, and
Yes,
suddenly becomes about not what you thought it was about.
and it was a great popular success.
Huge.
Like you, it
Yeah.
sounds like I had not watched it ever
So
for
this was your
whatever
first
reason.
time.
So I
Okay.
watched it first time through it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that I thought it was okay, and but I could see why people would like it,
Yeah.
but like it to the extent that it had two sequels, and then it had a TV series, and then like 30 years later they did a remake, and
Relaunch.
I didn't know it was that good. I mean,
No,
I didn't think it was bad, but I'm not sure I saw what was in there that appealed that much to people that they were able to, get a franchise going.
I will say that the theme about the parents to me is much more successful than the film as a comedy. I don't know if I ever laughed out loud.
No,
There's some stuff that made me smile. Mathau was entertaining, his middle-aged drunk guy. Um, but I don't think it was the funniest film I've ever seen. Um, haven't seen any of the sequels. I'd forgotten there was a TV series, and by the time I have no interest in seeing the Billy Bob Thornton or anything like that.
yeah.
Okay, Bingo Long. Now I had it in my mind that Kale really liked it. I'm totally wrong because I went to read a review and there is no review. She just mentioned it in passing in her Saturday Night Fever review, unless I'm somewhere else. I checked when the lights go down. There's no review. Um, I thought it was good. Uh, I appreciate that the film was even made, for one thing, because it was about the Negro Leagues. And, if you're going to make a baseball film, I think that's a great subject. And I'm glad that John Badham took it on. It's got a great cast, some very famous actors. Billy D. Williams, kind of in his prime. I
Yep.
guess he's most famous for The Lady Sings the Blues. James Earl Jones, Richard Pryor, just starting out in film, I think. It's before Blue Collar. Probably not his first film, but it must be close to his first film. Some other actors I think I recognized. Like I say, I didn't love it. It's sort of like Bad News Bears. I liked the serious part at the end, the comedy. I thought it was okay. I smiled. I never really laughed. It's got some stuff that some people might not I don't know how well they think it dates, how well they
Mhm.
think it holds up today. The serious part I'll salute is at the end. It was very touching because one of the two main actors knows it's the end. And when the guy that gets
Yeah.
called up, it's funny, they sort of combined, I thought, Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays into one character because this guy gets the call, but he's a center fielder. He reminded me of Mays, but it's obviously Jackie Robinson. And I can't remember which one. I think it's James Earl Jones knows that's the end of these leagues. And the other one says, no, no, we're going to have a great team next year.
Yeah.
So I've talked enough. You talk.
Well, first off, I think that it was complicated in the way that it dealt with how these ball players presented themselves to their public, which was not always black. Sometimes they were white or mixed with sitting in different places. It was that they knew that they would get bigger crowds and get better response from the white audiences if they clowned it.
Yeah, that was the
And
part that
sometimes
I
they
thought.
would,
Yeah.
well, sometimes they would clown it and they saw that it worked. And I think watching the movie, we were supposed to see that as an unfortunate thing. They can't just play ball. They've got to do this, thing just like, the minstrel show kind of thing.
Yeah.
The
That's
problem,
a
I
good way
think,
to.
because I do think that's what they wanted to say, but the problem was some of those scenes were so good that we're watching them and we're thinking, these clowns are funny. Well, we end up being, or the film ends up being in that same position of doing minstrel entertainment to make everybody happy. And so the message to me is mixed, but I appreciate that it was in there. The context, yes, appreciated that quite a bit.
I think I
You
just
mentioned the
want to say
cast. Oh, sure.
I think you present that well. The fact that honorable intentions, but they did it so well that it becomes a little hard to watch it at times.
But you could then understand like why how the players it was a situation. What were they going to do? You
Yep.
mentioned the cast, so I wanted to bring up a couple. Mr. Pryor, of course. Um, I have to throw in Wild in the Streets, which came in the late '60s. He's in Wild
Oh,
in the
okay.
Streets. Might
He'd
be his
been,
first movie, so he'd been
yeah,
around a little bit.
yeah,
He might have made a couple of comedy albums by then.
yeah. And
One of the
he was also supposed to be, I think, Cleavon Little's character in Blazing Saddles.
that makes sense.
I think he was the original choice, come to think of it.
Mhm. There was I don't remember the name of his character, but there was a ex, maybe more than one. There was an ex ball player playing one of the ball players, Leon Wagner, who
Yes, I
was
looked that up. You're right.
an
Daddy
original
Wag.
San Francisco Giant. He had him in 58 and 59, Daddy Wags.
Yep.
And I guess his life didn't go all that well ultimately, but it was great fun watching him in this movie. He wasn't acting in that sense, but he was fine.
He was good. I
And
know
then
for a
one,
fact he hit 37 home runs one year. That number sticks out in
okay,
my mind. I'll check that out, but I'm pretty sure for Cleveland, not for
that was
San
part of
Francisco.
that first outfield we had out here. Anyway, the other one, an actor named Dwayne Jesse, which I don't, it doesn't mean anything to me. And I didn't know. I was so excited by who he was. I forgot to note which character he was. He might have been the guy who didn't talk. Not
Yes.
positive though.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dwayne Jesse was known as Otis Day from Otis Day and the Nights in Animal
Oh,
House,
Animal House. There
singing
you go.
shout
Yeah, yeah,
or miming shout while someone else sings it. And
yeah.
I thought, well, there you go. He was wondering what happened to that guy. Well, this was actually before Animal House, but I found that delightful that this guy, because you find those little things. The movie's going on. This person rose to stardom. That person ended up in Star Wars, and this guy ended up singing "Shout" in Animal House.
Who played the film's villain? He's a well-known actor, I think.
Yeah, who is that guy?
I should have looked up his name. I
Trying to remember.
recognized him immediately.
Hmm.
I liked you talk about, doing whatever you have to do to fit in or please the crowd. I liked Richard Pryor's idea where, sometimes he's Cuban, sometimes he's this,
Yeah,
sometimes he's that. the whole which happened, I think, right? Players pass, tried
And
to pass.
it's
Yeah.
funny. It's not the only time that was used in a movie where if it was a case where before black players came to the majors, so they said, "Well, we'll make you a Cuban." But there was also Major League had the guy had the voodoo and Bull Durham's got the first baseman. I don't know why they're always first baseman, but his glove is cursed, and
Right.
that's all because they come from Jamaica or something. I guess
Yeah.
we'll get to
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. I know there were some Cuban, two or three Cuban players in the majors in the 20s or 10s who were light skinned enough that
Yeah.
they nobody questioned them. So that was kind of a neat thing with Pryor. Um, and again, I did find the ending moving.
Yeah.
Which of the two was it? James Earl Jones that was trying to tell Billy D. Williams it was the end, or vice versa?
I think that's how it went. Because Billy Dean Williams' character was kind of a Bullington, like, look what we're doing, isn't this great?
Yeah,
James Earl Jones almost had to be dragged into it in the first place.
right,
You got
right.
the feeling he was older, you know,
Yeah,
and it
uh,
was funny that to see him in that, and then of course later you get Field of Dreams, and he's back.
yeah, yeah. And,
Yeah,
goes on to do Star Wars. Um, was James Earl Jones more or less meant to be Josh Gibson?
uh, I mean, you know how those things go.
Yeah,
Pick
I
the
just thought,
handful of best Negro League catchers, and he was probably one of those.
yeah, because he's big, and and again, Billy D.
Yeah,
Williams with his trick pitches, I think is
yeah,
meant to at least evoke Satchel Paige, not be Satchel Paige.
yes,
Okay, so it was good, and this might be actually just I want to jump in with Ken Burns baseball because um,
okay,
the two things to me, I know I'm jumping right off track here what we said, but since we're talking about bingo long, the two things, I love the baseball. The It's not perfect by any means. We talked about at least one of the flaws, how New York centric it is. So people like Clemente and Al Kaline and Frank Robinson get a little bit of short shrift. Um, it's got the style. I never watched the Civil War documentary, but I know Burns' style becomes kind of, subject to parody at a certain point. One of the guys, funny guy in the message board, says every time he sees Buck O'Neill now, he automatically the frame freezes and camera starts slowly panning. Um, but the two things I thought were great about it. Number one, the timing that it aired originally during the strike when that was a crisis for baseball,
hmm
and Ken Burns jumps in with this amazingly detailed history of baseball. And the other thing was that it was, and the movement has really been in this direction the last 2 years with revising the record books. When Kim Burns did baseball, I don't think you could take it for granted that he would put Josh Gibson and Jackie Robinson right alongside, especially Jackie
uh-huh.
Robinson, Babe Ruth as the sports hero. That film
hmm
almost unfolds along two tracks. It's the Babe Ruth story and it's the Jackie Robinson story.
hmm
And I thought that was great. And
That's
long
what I
overdue.
remembered. What I took best from most from it is that race was always at the center of what he was
Yeah,
trying to do, and it's
yeah,
like he didn't ever want us to step too far away from the fact, the impact that a country's attitude towards race impacted the topic of his 9 hour documentary.
absolutely. Anyway, so those were the two '70s films. And I should mention here that of the first half dozen or dozen films I remember watching as a kid, two of them were baseball films. One of them, which Joe Pizansky says is one of the worst films ever made. Ronald Reagan is Grover Cleveland
Oh,
Alexander, the winning
Georgia.
team. He
Yeah,
wrote the stuff he writes about that is so funny in the Baseball 100. I loved it as a kid, of course. I still
sure.
remember him coming out for the, strikeout Tony Lazzeri, and he,
Yeah, in the
because of
ninth.
his
Yeah,
medical condition, he's seeing
yeah.
double, all of that. And the other one, I should have looked up the title. I can't remember it now. It's Dan Daly as Dizzy Dean.
Spirit of St. Louis, was it?
Well,
I think that might have been it.
that's the Charles Lindbergh film, Spirit of St.
You might be right.
Yeah.
One of those two. But
Oh,
yes, I do remember
remember
seeing that
that?
as a kid.
Yeah. I think Doris Day was in the winning team. I don't know who played alongside Dan Daly. Anyway, I remember those two films very fondly as a kid. I've never gone back to watch them again. So the next
Did
one we
excuse
would
me, did Dizzy Dean as a an announcer, did he make it up your way that you knew of him in that sense when you were growing up, or was it too
uh
too
no, I
early and too American?
too early. My first announcers when I started watching it was Graziola, Kurt Gowdy. I think
Yeah.
Tony Kubek was on the broadcast. So I missed Dizzy Dean, although I got to see the pretend or got to hear the pretend Dizzy Dean when the Jays started their launched their franchise. Early Wynn was in the booth trying to be Dizzy Dean. Um,
Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese. Pee Wee
okay,
Reese was his teammate or whatever,
sorry I
and
missed
they
that.
were the most casual uh, team. I mean, it's not that he didn't know baseball and they'd announce it, but Diz was always singing Wabash Cannonball, and uh, he was famous. It shows up in that movie about him for butchering the language, and but and one of the favorites for Giants fans, there was a player named Joe Amalfitano,
I know,
and
I know
there's
that.
actually a YouTube video. It's got like a 10-minute clip of Dizzy and Pee Wee. Diz never did figure out how to say that player's name. And so he comes to bat in the video. And here's Joe, Joe. And he calls him Joe. And then he tries to say Amalfitano the next time, and he can't get it right. And nobody cared. It was delightful.
And that was the
Yeah, it
game
was
of the week.
delightful.
That was the NBC game of the week.
Yes, it was CBS. They were on
CBS.
CBS, and I'm not positive when NBC came in there. And we started getting two in the mid '60s. The Yankees bought CBS, or at least the sports division, and
The
so
installment.
every week it was the Yankee game of the week, and that was when they started stinking. Of course, who'd have expected that? And Diz would be like, there's a better game on the other channel right now. This game sucks, but they couldn't get rid of me, Dizzy D. Anyway,
No, I'm sorry I missed them. Okay, so the next one I'm pretty sure chronologically would be Bull Durham, which I think probably kicked off that flurry of baseball films. Either that, or maybe it was Major League, which I've never seen. Which at least Guy Bullwith has urged me to see it because it's like the funniest film ever made. But I know I just decided it wasn't for me. Should I see it?
uh, especially I saw two. I don't know if there's more than two. They were funny. But
Okay.
in Major League Two, there's these fans who are so obnoxious, and I saw myself in them. The way they yell at the other team's players and all this stuff. I said, "My God, is that what I'm like?" So it really hit me in the wrong spot. But they were funny enough. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll give the first one a chance at some point. Now, Bull Durham, I think 88 seems about right. And I think we both had the experience of rewatching it this time and it being either better than we remembered or maybe our expectations of we've softened as we've gotten older. I was very at 27 at the time, very judgmental, prone to that. This is great or this is terrible, with no in between. I didn't like it at the time. Seemed fine this time. Um, Number of things I liked. I really enjoyed Tim Robbins.
Mhm.
It was broad comedy, but there was also more going on there. I liked where he was making fun of when the last sit down, he sits down just as he's about to head off to the show. He sits down with Kevin Costner, and Costner gives him some last bit of advice, and he says, "You got to be fearless and arrogant." And he says, "Right, got it, fearless and ignorant." And Costner, of course, flips out. And Tim Robbins says, "No, no, I heard you. I like getting under you. I like to see you get all riled up." So he wasn't a complete simpleton after all. Costner, who I generally don't like, and I've really come to kind of hate him in JFK, he was good. That's the one role I think he can play. He has to be good looking. He has to never his temperature never has to, go above 98.6, except although I guess he does get angry a couple times. He's very cool. He never says the wrong thing. He was really good. Susan Sarandon was very good. Um, what else? I like the romance of it. Romances aren't my favorite films, but I thought it worked out well the way she played off the two of them. And the one thing I want to say, I'll hand over to you in a second. The one thing I think made me appreciate the film more is that I just read a book by Pat Jordan called The Suitors of Spring. You know the baseball writer Pat Jordan?
I do know the writer. I don't know the book.
Yeah, he used to write for Sports Illustrated, wrote a book about his own minor league experiences called The False Spring. I haven't read it, but I read the excerpt at the time in Sports Illustrated. It was great. He washed out as a minor leaguer. Anyway, a few years, I think this was actually his first book. He profiled a bunch of pitchers, Seaver, Sam McDowell. But one of the chapters was devoted to a guy. Oh, I should have caught down his name. It was Hayuk something, Willard Hayuk or something like that, who was, as Pat Jordan explained it, an organization man, career minor leaguer who would do whatever the organization asked him to do because he liked to stay in the game. So if he got sent down, to kind of take this pitcher, be more like take a young catcher under his wing, he would do it. If he got sent somewhere else in the same season because they had a dire need to have this position filled, he would do it. All hoping that one day we get to be a coach. I have to believe that Ron Shelton, director of Bull Durham, was familiar with this book and familiar with this chapter. And I know it's based on his own experiences, but it really mirrored the Pat Jordan chapter on this guy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I liked it. What'd you think?
Yeah, me too. Of all the ones we watched for this project, it was the one I liked best.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, first off, to get to Kevin Costner, like you, I don't hate Kevin Costner. You can't hate him,
He's just
but because there's
bland.
nothing there, for the most part.
Yeah.
But if he's cast well and he has a director that just takes advantage of him, his Kevin Costnerness, I think he's fine. And in this movie, it works. And he switch hits. You know, that's pretty good when you get those actors and we'll get the shoeless Joe swinging it the wrong way and Fielder. Kevin Costner could switch hit.
We haven't talked.
That
Yeah,
in itself impressed me. You
we
know,
haven't talked about the problem of baseball films is, where you get these like just people trying to be baseball players. They're terrible.
exactly.
Jody, they shot when Jodie Foster pitched in the Bad News Bears. I don't know, it was, somebody else doing it or trick photography
Hmm.
doing it, but that looked credible to me. And you're
Yes, I
right,
think
Kevin
there was a
Costner.
combo of stand-in and her.
Yeah, whatever they did, and Kevin Costner looked, and you're basically saying he was doing his
Yeah,
own hitting. He looked very credible
yeah,
all
he
the
could.
time. Yeah,
The other thing I'll mention, since you said Ron Shelton's name in passing, I was so, of course, he ended up making a lot of sports movies,
yeah,
but this was his first, and I was already attached to him and his baseball stuff. He wrote the script for Under Fire, one of my all-time favorite movies with Nick Nolte
yeah.
and Gene Hackman about Nicaragua. And they're out there trying to cover, they're journalists, they're trying to cover the Civil War down there. And there's this one little revolutionary kid, teenager maybe, and he's good at throwing like grenades and stuff because he wants to be a pitcher when he grows up. And he at one point he gets a baseball and gives it to Nick Nolte. You give this to Dennis Martinez, he says. Because Dennis Martinez is the hero of all Nicaraguans,
That's
especially the
good.
baseball ones.
That's
And
good.
right already, I'm thinking, whatever else this Rob, he sure does seem to know about baseball. And then it turned out, yeah, he did know about baseball. And so much of uh, even the most memorable scenes, like meeting on the mound and stuff, they're believable. You can just imagine that happening. And they don't, I mean, some of them are funny and goofy, but they're, you never think where that come from. You
He
think this guy's
directed
been there.
he directed Tin Cup too, right? Is that
Tin
his?
Cup and what's well, I'm blanking out now, but yeah, he's made he made a basketball one.
Um,
Anyway,
Another thing I liked about Bull Durham, and it's just a minor thing, but I thought it was very nicely done. The opening collage with the still photographs of
Oh
various
yeah,
baseball had
yeah.
Eddie Goodell was in there, Jackie Robinson, of course. Um, man, I can think of anything else. I thought every photo was really well selected. I kept
Mhm.
thinking, great, he got that, and he got that, and he got that. Um,
Yeah.
and it kind of went against the grain again. I think if people remember Bull Durham, I could be wrong here. Like the first thing they might remember is, Tim Robbins throwing the ball 60 feet over the batter's head and think of it as a rollicking comedy. And it had some funny stuff that did make me laugh. Um, but I thought that opening collage showed it was also just about a love for baseball, expressed obviously through some of Susan Sarandon's voiceovers.
Yes,
I
I should mention Susan Sarandon because I did think she was good.
Yeah.
And when it begins, I'm like, oh God, here we go, the groupie. This is what a standard character, but the writing's good, and she acts the heck out of the part. Um, she has to be the one to do the Church of Baseball crap, which we can get to at Fields of Dreams. Not my favorite part, but other than that, uh, she too is believable in a way. It was like this is an actual woman, middle aged woman. She wasn't a groupie, in that sense. She had a thing going on. So I just thought that she added a lot also, aided
Yeah.
by the script.
Well, she made it clear she was monogamous during the baseball season, but she obviously, took an immediate attraction to Kevin Costner. I really liked the fight they had the first time they met. It was kind of corny, but it was great. He says, "Okay, you can throw some of the baseball," and he just knows he's going to miss him. And just typical movie, an exit line. Oh, I'm your new catcher, and he walks away. That scene, which was very cliched, was handled really well, I thought. Um, there was something else across my mind. I don't know what it was, but listen, we've got about 3 minutes, so I think we should log off. I should save this and
Okay.
come back in 10 minutes, and we'll start in on our last. We've done three so far. Okay, sound
Yeah,
good?
sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Talk to you in a bit, Steve.